So hi everyone, I think we can start now. So we have the great honor to have two speakers today, and one is Felipe Heusser, and he's presently a fellow at Berkman Center, and Berkman Center is a research center at Harvard Law School, and he has been here for a few months, and it seems that he has a very exciting project here going on. And but he will introduce himself more thoroughly. And another speaker is from Taiwan. He's Gao Jialiang, and you can just call him Seal. And he's here to, together with his friend Felipe, we will talk about the open data government and also open data movement and also open government movement in these two countries. And so without delay, I will give the floor to them. So each of them will have a 15-minute presentation and just a very short presentation of what they have been doing and what are the personal experience, as well as at a very general level what these movements are in their countries. And then we will open the floor to the audience and welcome all kinds of questions.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning. Thank you very much for being here this morning again. It's always a challenge when you're working throughout the week and just to come up on Saturday morning. It speaks very highly, not of the panel, but of you guys actually for showing up. So thank you very much for that. It's also a great pleasure to be here and to be sharing this table with Ciel, who's a good friend and also a prolific civic hacker and inspiration among the community of civic hacking and technologists using technology for the purpose of openness, participation, and different things that we'd like to talk about today. And also thank you very much, absolutely, for the invitation, for allowing us to share this space. I expect it to be more than a presentation, for which I have about 15 minutes or so, also to leave enough room for conversation. I am aware, of course, that you're probably here more to listen to Ciel and his experience in Taiwan, what's going on there, rather than the Chilean experience. But that said, I think there's a context and there's similarities across Chile, across Taiwan, but also across South Africa, the UK, the US, regarding this open government and open data movement, if they actually exist, which is what I would like to say. So again, I'm a Berkman Fellow. I was a Berkman Fellow also in 2011-12, and now I have the pleasure to be back at the Berkman Center, which is a center that is based here in law school, but it is also related to other centers and faculties such as the Kennedy School, engineering, journalism, and so forth. It's a space to research about the cyberspace. Not only the legal part of it, which is what Berkman initially started doing, but now it's about the legal? The legal and illegal, of course. But it's also about researching the intersections of the internet and politics, the internet and philosophy, the internet and technology itself. So you're absolutely welcome, for those of you who are based here, to go to 23 Everett Street, where the Berkman Center is, and yeah, just join the community and participate and learn and teach us as well from your experiences. So I'm also I am a lawyer, but I sort of say that I used to be because I haven't practiced law in several years. I'm more of a policy person, and that's what I studied, and that's what I have been working on for years. And I had the pleasure to start an NGO about 6 years ago that is called Ciudadano Inteligente, which is a civic technology organization based in Santiago, Chile, that works across Latin America for the purpose of using technology as a means for transparency, participation, accountability, and so forth. And I will show you some examples of our work as also an example of the open data and open government movements that are taking place not only in Chile but also across Latin America. So one technique that in academia is very typical to use when you're doing a presentation about something is to kind of challenge the title or the question, right, about this presentation. And this presentation and the panel is about open data and open government movements in Chile and Taiwan. So what I would first like to do is kind of challenge the idea of movements and briefly, revise what is a movement, what is its main characteristics, and taking that into account, see if actually we have or not an open government and an open data movement in Chile. So social movements are collective challenges to elites, authorities, other groups, or cultural codes by people with common purposes and solidarity in sustained interactions with elites, opponents, and authorities. So basically from this definition, a movement, if you want to call it like that, has broadly said three main characteristics. The first one is that to be a movement, you need to be a collective. So it's not just you and your circumstances, it is you plus others. You're a group of people. Secondly, you have common purposes among that group, right? And those purposes don't necessarily need to be very refined and all agree on the specific reason or purpose. Purposes can also be fairly wide, but they need to exist. Like in Chile, for example, in 2011, we had the student movement, which was claiming for better quality of education in the public space. The LGBT movement, for example, for different reasons, they claim for more inclusion, gay rights, Tahrir Square. I'm sure there are several reasons why people showed up to Tahrir Square in the first place. It doesn't have to be one single purpose. It can be interpreted in different ways, but still there is something that is uniting you as part of a collective. And the third characteristic is to have sustained interactions as a collective against or with another group, another belief, another political party, a government, etc. And an example of this sustained interaction, in the case of the student movement in Chile, for example, is that for sustained interaction, for a movement, it's not enough to show up once. It's not enough to organize a hackathon. It's not enough to organize a conference. To be a movement, you need sustained interactions. The Chilean student movement is a movement because they showed up, they realized, wow, there's actually a lot of us that are claiming for better quality of education. They organized as students, they had a petition, they organized more meetings, more people showed up, they went to Congress, they pursued a law, they pursued policy change, and in the end, actually, some of them got elected as congressmen. So there are sustained interactions. There's a purpose, there's a collective, and there are sustained interactions. So about open government as movement. Movement that, by the way, of course, is not in Chile. We're a small country. It is something that is picking up, and it's a movement that is being baked across different countries. And one example of this is the Open Government Partnership, which is a group or a coalition of governments, civil societies, and businesses that have an agenda for transparency in government activity. Now, as we will see, the reasons for transparency may be wide, and in some occasions they actually may be colliding, right? But at least they all agree on the need of more government information to be available. So I think the open government is a movement in Chile because it is a collective, first characteristic of a movement. It's a collective in Chile of NGOs that have been pushing for this agenda, probably based on a freedom of information and actually human right, freedom of expression approach. You have governments for a variety of reasons, or our government engaging in the open government agenda. You have media also pushing for open government as a matter of releasing information about storytelling, academics for the variety of purposes, including writing more papers about it. International organizations, the World Bank, has had a significant role in pushing the open government agenda, meaning approving free information laws, as an example, and other standards. And also you have businesses pushing for the open government agenda for a matter of probably attracting foreign investment. You know, you need to trust where you want to invest, and therefore transparency is a mean towards creating an atmosphere or a context where it is more reliable to put your investment on. So you have a collective for reasons that are different, but you have a collective. Again, purposes that are different. If transparency would be the sun, they go around transparency for wide different reasons. They benefit from the heat in different ways as well, but they are a collective. And finally, and more importantly, and as you will see, this will be the main difference, I believe, from the open government movement as opposed or contrasted with the open data one, is that in the open government movement, there are sustained interactions. There's a strong human rights background. There's a freedom of expression tradition. These are groups, civil society ones, that for years have been pushing the open government agenda, and previously have been pushing for the freedom of expression agenda when we had dictatorships across all Latin America. These are organized groups that also passed or pushed to have policy and regulation change. We got freedom of information laws passed, and there was pressure to get that policy and that regulation change to take place. When freedom of information laws were approved, this collective was accessing information. They were submitting freedom of information requests. They were using it, transparency. And also, you have an organized civil society group or coalition that is protecting the space. If the government is pushing back, if they increase fees when you want to request information, if they're not releasing information that is relevant to the public, there's a well-organized architecture of groups, civil society, that is protecting the law and making sure that it's actually moving forward and not backwards. And again, there's ongoing usage of public information. To monitor government, we do lots of that from our NGO. We monitor government activity. Media is using freedom of information, accessing information, requesting information for the purpose of writing stories, in some occasions to challenge corruption, and others to tell you about what's going on within government in different spheres, for personal reasons as well. But as you see, there is a flow of public information. There's an infrastructure of sustained interactions between a collective that gathers for a variety of purposes, but is pushing and pushing for transparency. So, is open government a movement? The answer is yes. I believe we have an open government movement in Chile, in several Latin American countries as well. Chile is one of them, Peru is another strong one, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil are countries that have a very similar structure. So there's a yes to that answer of an open government movement. So what about open data? Are we a movement? And how different is open data from open government? So for those of you who are not familiar to the open data agenda, what it means, just a bit of context. So theopendefinition.org, it's a group, or it's a website, it's a collective of people who are actually defining this, and it's the best way to reference the definition about open data. It says, so referring to open data, data that can be freely accessed, used, modified, and shared for any purpose. Data, typically in the hands of a government, that can be freely accessed, used, modified, and shared for any purpose. So does it mean that if a government just publishes data or information online, it has open data? Well, not necessarily. Tim Berners-Lee, who was the founder of the World Wide Web, created this kind of typology of 5 different steps of data, or when you could consider data to be open or, more or less open. The 5 categories that he came up with are these. The first one, kind of the 5-star, kind of the hotel idea of 5-star, right? So the 1 star of an open data means basically that the government releases its data. It doesn't matter the format. You could be a PDF. You can be proprietary, but you release your information, right? Second step, you get a 2-star if the information you release is machine readable, right? But you get a 2-star and not a 3 because it's proprietary. So there's some degree of control of the owner of that license. And thirdly, you have a machine readable format with 3 stars, but that is open, like CSV format, for example. 4th stars you get when you publish your data in a URL, and that URL is not like, I don't know, Harvard/data/numbers and hashtags and like that very difficult thing, but it's actually organized. So like Harvard/education/data/Berkman Center/ I don't know, library. It's organized. It's telling you more about where the information is stored. And the 5-star is when you can actually link your data set to other data sets and have what it's called linked data. And there's formats for that, like RDF and others. But so that's it. Now, open data is important for a variety of reasons, of which I would like to highlight today. The first one is because it has the potential to lead towards transparency in government activity. It's a potential. It's not always the case. And if you have too much data sometimes, if it's not well organized, you can actually have data overload and data smog, and actually not understanding anything you're seeing because there's just too much data. It has the potential to result in better governance, whatever the World Bank understands as better governance in the first place. It's not clear, but eventually it can lead to a better organization and governance. Thirdly, it has the potential to hold governments accountable. And fourth, it has the potential to lead towards economic growth by not only have a context where there's more trust in terms of investment, but actually you have an economy or you have in a market that people may access this information or data to produce applications of different sorts. Applications to use public transport, applications for public health, applications for the weather, for many things that data is available and you can produce, and eventually there will be markets about it. Now, for me, really, this is only potential. Of the research that is out there regarding open data, we don't have a robust, empirical kind of analysis telling you, yes, open data exactly, and we haven't measured the degree to which it results in growth. It results in less corruption. For me, ultimately, it's about potential, but if there's one reason why we should push for that agenda, it's because it is our right to information. And in a context where government activity is mostly digitalized, right? It's not government just sending papers of do this and that, or the rules or whatever it is. It's about sending emails. It's about data sets that allow you to take decisions, where you store information about traffic, where you store information about patients in a hospital, store information about taxes, and so forth. If we have a government that is actually using and interacting within government and outside government through data, and you don't have access to data, then you have a problem in regards to your right to information, right? And that's why it's important. It's not because of growth, not because of necessarily participation, though I do believe in some occasions it may draw participation, but it's ultimately a reason of right to information. So back to our question, open data movement. Kind of. Are we a movement? Kind of. We are a collective, yes. We have a group of people, mainly coming from the technology sector rather than the NGO sector, people that understand why this data may be useful. We have organized, we have hackathons going on, we have people using information for a variety of different purposes. We even have engaged with some people from the government. This picture over here is not a group of friends. Well, actually, we ended up being close friends, but we have people from NGOs, hackers, journalists, government officials, international organizations, bureaucrats, and it's a broad coalition of people that are on top of the table discussing about open data and are trying to understand some of the benefits that this open data agenda has. And again, similarly to the right to information agenda, people have, and these groups have a variety of different purposes or reasons to be there. NGOs want open data because it is basically an update of our traditional right to information. Businesses want open data as a means to create new applications and markets and business opportunities by using public data that were previously not available. So only government organizations probably could produce services regarding weather, for example. Now that information, if it's put out there easily, you can have sort of a market that is using weather information for which you need a big satellite and stuff that really a government can afford. But if the information is out there, you can create a market that is using and benefiting from that data in a variety of ways. You have academics also pushing for this agenda, telling us about standards of how can this get better, and also you have journalist organizations that are using data and open data as a means for research and research journalism and storytelling. Now, the third characteristic of a movement was this idea of sustained interactions. So open data is a movement because we are sort of having a collective group. We kind of have purpose, which is the release of data, for a variety of different reasons. But what about sustained interactions? No, not quite, at least. And so basically I think that and this really I think applies not only to Chile. You tell me if it applies to Taiwan as well. But I see this in many countries. Open data, we're not yet that collective group that open government coalition movements have. We are big enthusiasts about open data and what it can bring, but we're not so organized yet. We have very, very little debate about law at all. And there's little effort to pursue an institutional open data recognition. So in parallel to the right to information and the open government one, when they realized that they needed a free information law in place, because information is not being released because of government being merciful or kind, it's because citizens are entitled to that information. And therefore you need a law to recognize that situation. So that conversation in terms of the legal aspect of it and understand it not just as a service or something useful, but actually a right is something that is missing, I see, in the open government coalition and across countries too. And also, thirdly, sustained interactions, too much scraping data, very little liaising with governments. You have lots of hacker groups scraping, building, scripts to get information out there from the different websites, but they're not actually showing up and meeting with government officials, pushing and demanding for access to information. Sometimes it's easier to just sit around on a table and see what information is out there, what can be shared, what can you build. But it's kind of a shy movement so far that is trying to get data just through your computer, not showing up, and which sometimes is important, especially when it comes to government. So in short, yeah, not interacting enough, and that's why I think we are a work in progress as a movement, and we have a lot to learn from the open government one that I explained earlier. So I probably have just a couple of minutes. I don't know, but I thought it would be interesting to also show you some examples of our work. Moving aside from this kind of more intro or framework of open government, open data characteristics. What does it mean? Is it a movement or not? So also show you some fun, really, of what we do as an organization, and which is also similar to what other organizations are doing as well. So, Ciudad Inteligente is a civic technology NGO. I mentioned this. We have been 5 to 6 years in the neighborhood developing technology for transparency and channeling citizen participation. We have developed, about 14 different websites so far. Websites that allow you to access information about elections, get information, to provide it to citizens so that they can contrast candidates based on data that we have about their political positions in the present and in the past. We develop applications that allow you to access information or to request information using Freedom of Information Law in a single window, allowing the process to be much easier. We have applications that visualize data about performance in government activity. So we can tell you how is actually government performing in the different areas that you can contrast, that you can see actually through different visualizations. We use data also as a way to show the degree to which president, in this case, former president, is fulfilling the promises he made in a public speech or in when he was running for president. You know, that is data now. You know, in the past, you would run for president, you would have a big agenda, manifesto that would be, you know, somewhere in a library, some videos about your public speeches, somewhere in a, you know, in a newsroom. But now this is data. You can bring it back again. You can organize it. You can store it. You can tell, you know, what's going on here. You promised this. What have you been able to deliver? Recently, we launched this website, Congreso Abierto, Open Congress. It is using data about Congress. It tells you that you can find information about the bills that are being discussed, information about who's voting what, about what, information about individual members of Congress, their latest activity in Congress, their initiatives, how they're voting. You can understand this, you can visualize it, accessing data. Data that we also provide to citizens that can challenge or can ask questions to not government officials, actually representatives. So this is a question that was sent by a citizen, and you got a senator and a deputy actually answering the question through the website. All of which is the result of a release of data that allows people to understand what's going on in government activity, and specific about a law or something that they're interested in. A final example that I love to show as an example of how you can do, or how you can use open data as a mean to exercise accountability is this website. It's called the Inspector of Interest. Freedom of Information Law requires members of Congress to disclose their assets and their interests. They actually should do this and publish it online and should be updated frequently, or if there's a change in circumstances regarding their assets. We realized as a group that those databases were actually not being updated enough. So we thought, well, we can do something about it. And we built a database with all this information, assets and interests that members of Congress have published and disclosed. But we also had other data sources that were open, that we can access, some of which we could scrape, some of which we access more formally, about the Tax and Revenue Service was releasing data. The Public Register was releasing data. You know, when you create a company, you have to publish it somewhere. That is data at some point. And if you start crossing these data sources, you can come up with a very interesting story. For example, in each profile of a member of Congress, we had this that could contrast how many companies he had and he disclosed in comparison to what the data told us about his assets, right? So he was disclosing just 33% of his companies. But if you look at all these other data sources when they're crossed, you can actually tell, you know, 66% were not being disclosed. And you can actually have the detail of the name of the company, what is the industry about, fishing, energy, mining, electricity, and so forth. And because we had the previous website, the one I showed you here, data about the bills and everything, you can also tell if there's a, you know, intersection between a bill, a motion, and their assets. So actually, like, there's an energy bill he's promoting where he has all these energy companies. For example. So that is a use, again, of open data in a more accountability perspective. There's also uses of open data for developing applications for public services. Again, we have seen a lot on education, a lot on transport, a lot on health. So just to close the idea, open government data is important. It has huge potential for the purposes of challenging citizen participation. It has potential as a tool to challenge government from the transparency and accountability point of view. Eventually, it could drive economic growth if it's managed correctly, if incentives are placed in the right way. But ultimately, it is all about updating the right to information that citizens have. Information that is produced by government, that is used by government, is not owned by government. It's managed by government. It's owned by citizens who elect governments. And that's why, again, it's important. We are not a movement yet, and we have lots to learn from the open government movements that for years have been pushing this agenda. Ultimately, what is important, again, to become this movement is to have sustained interactions. It's not enough showing up that you think this is important, writing a blog post, going to a meeting, going to a conference. If open data is to become a movement, a sustainable one, it means continuous demand for that information. I think that is a shared responsibility. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thanks to Felipe for the refreshing perspective on open government and open data. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in Taiwan and what's particularly interesting and how, I think we sort of have a movement that's also probably more toward open government, but with open data as part of the means. So I'm going to show you some stuff with them. So in 2012, there's a TV commercial in Taiwan aired. It's basically saying that economy affairs are very complicated. You, the citizen, don't really need to know the details. We, the government, will fix it, right? So it's like a 40-second commercial, and I was so pissed off after seeing this. Just like, what? And so it's like, okay, we can understand it's complicated, but it's not the attitude we want from government. Say, okay, you don't need to care about that. And so we're kind of seeing, okay, we're so angry now, what can we do? And because it's like a TV commercial, spending tax money, so we thought maybe we try to see how the government is spending money. So by the way, CL, as Yichen has introduced, and that's my student. And I've been an open source software developer for about 15 years now, and you can see I like doing software even in hospital. Anyway, so government budget was thinking, okay, how can we see what's happening in the government? And of course, government budget is released in this kind of PDF. But since we're developers, programmers, with some programming, we're trying to turn it into something more visible and more understandable, comprehensible. So we turn it into bubbles. And so each bubble is like the entry of budget, and the size, of course, is the size of the budget. And you can group it by the ministry managing it, or by business type. And you can also see the history for a particular entry of the budget. As you've probably seen this before on New York Times, it's definitely inspired by the Obama budget visualization. So this kind of thing is basically what we do. And then this is actually the first project for GovZero. And we were thinking, okay, we can probably do more stuff like that and then encourage people to work on this kind of stuff. So we did a name, right? So, government websites go GOV.tw in Taiwan. What if you just change one character? Suddenly it comes better.
Sorry, can you be a little bit louder for the recording?
Sure.
Thank you.
we have a microphone.
Oh, okay. Try that.
It's there.
Will that work?
That one
Does that work? Okay. Right. So what if we just change one character and suddenly the website becomes a lot better than with open API and even open data? and then we give it back to the government or even the government's vendor, right? So that's the idea for this NAN. And also the zero means we are like the digital natives. Like I never bought newspaper myself. And in this age, we might be able to rethink how the government should interact with citizens from zero. So we've been quite a community. We are like a collective, and then we have a common purpose toward open government. But it's just a very rough consensus about what we are trying to do. But what we're doing is probably with open data, if there is open data. If not, we scrape it and then also tell the upstream, whichever agency is managing data, and tell them, okay, this is what you should do. After you do that, you can see this kind of results. And we want it as an open source project so we can encourage a lot of people to participate. So it's been a while, and then we've launched like maybe 40 or 50 projects. It's quite a lot. I'm going to just quickly show you some of the interesting ones I worked on personally. So this is the Congress website in Taiwan called ly.gov.tw. Like you change one character, suddenly it becomes a better one. Right? So how's it better? So this is Congress vote, and then we turn it into more visible and provide structural data if you want to do further analysis on the voting pattern and stuff. And actually other people, some statisticians actually did that, so it's really cool. And to better understand how the bill works, like how there's different places in the Congress, we also visualize the amount of bills in particular stage and how the flow works. So this is kind of messy because the legislative process is quite messy, so hairy, right? And we also try to visualize the Congress video because it's like usually a whole day meeting and it's usually boring and people don't want to watch that. So we turn it into kind of a waveform, and you can see what's happening when, and we overlay with whoever is speaking. So you can see some of the parts that are not overlaid with people, like top there and then bottom there. That's usually when I forget to turn off the microphone and recorded something I shouldn't. But that will be the interesting part, right? So, and also because the Congress video is so boring, and then so we kind of turn it into a game, and we can throw things to people who are speaking. And it's a connected game. You can see whoever's other people throwing things, and you can actually raise a net to protect the politicians. So yeah, it was a fun project. We worked on over the weekend, and it's got great publicity. But more seriously, what's the business in the Congress is like the bill, right? So we have a proper display, like the progress for a particular bill, what stage it is, and for more importantly, for the actual content for the proposed amendment in the bill. It was like that in the PDF, really, really long, like the tables, and it's really, really hard to read. So we turn that to what we developers are very familiar with. It's called a diff, basically showing what was there before and what was the proposed one, highlight changes. So it becomes very, very clear, and then we give each and every bill a unique URL that you can share. So when you want to discuss if you are for this bill or against this bill, you can actually read it rather than guess what's in it, right? So these are the kind of stuff we do with data, but it wasn't actually from data yet, so a lot of things are scraped, and then we tell the Congress, like, right, this is what we want, and if you provide data, this is what's possible without a lot of effort, right? So it's kind of a little bit of interaction, but not very sustained, I guess. We can do more, right? So another project that's very interesting is that there's a labor standard code in Taiwan with all the violations to labor standard, like if you don't pay for overtime, they're to be fined and then announced on website. But guess what? There are like 22 different agencies managing that for local government, and they announced that in different formats. So there's a project aggregating all this data and then putting it all together and into a service, which is a browser extension. After you install that, when you are looking for a job on some websites, it will pop up saying, hey, this company violated labor code 2 months ago. Are you sure you want to apply? So this is kind of interesting way of aggregating like messy data and then turn that into structured, and then there can be interesting services to that. Anyway, so we've been around for about almost 2 years now, and then having lots of hackathons, people getting around and do things. what's more interesting is that we've attracted more than 1,000 contributors up to now. Some of them just reported bugs, or some of them provided some ideas, right? So worked on 48 or more projects, and it's a great mix of people. We have about 40% of people being developers who can program, 30% being designer who design either traditional print ones or web designer. Another 30% people being activists who are familiar with issues, and even people from the government interact with us and come to the hackathon. So it's actually quite a large community, internationally recognized. And so I was often asked how we got there, how we attract so many people, how do you get, I guess Taiwan is special because we're constantly in political crisis, right? So, but before this is actually, before GovZero is actually, there's not such, I would say, huge community on this perspective. And one of the reasons is when developers, software developers came in, they recognize the issues and they can build something that's actually a great lever because they can enable a lot of more of participation from people through data or services. So how we got there? The first thing we do is open source. So I guess none of you are programmers. So open source is a way for doing software. When you get the software, you don't just get the software you run, but also the source code, which is how the developer, the original author, says how it was developed. And you can actually change that. You can actually improve that. So it's like a really weird way for doing things openly. Okay? So I'm not going into the detail of that, but what you should know is that it's a way for the open source collaboration is a way for people to collaborate without kind of central coordination. So it's very effective, very efficient for large scale participation. So we also built some infrastructure for the hackathons. Like one of the projects is called HackFolder because it's so many people to participating are participating in the hackathon. So we have lots of shared documents and spreadsheets. It's getting messy. So we developed a software called HackFolder to organize that kind of thing. And then it was actually turned into like an information aggregator for various events. Like there's a Kaohsiung explosion, and people are using this to coordinate and then collaborate on building the whole information about this incident and like who needs help where and that kind of information. And as you might know, what's happening now is there's a big protest in Hong Kong, and they're also using this same software for doing the collaboration. So you can see that the technology or the thing we built can actually enable more participation, more different kind of collaboration. So, but how do you get people to work together in a hackathon for different kinds of projects? You buy them food, right? Food, important. Anyway, so but the open source model is really important because it enables people to have a predefined consensus about what we're gonna do with the end result. We're gonna make it available to everyone, right? So it's like Wikipedia, because if there's one publisher tells you, okay, you can write an article for me, and you probably won't do that. But for Wikipedia, you write it for everyone, right? So that's where we come from, because I've been in open source community for a long time. And so step 2, I think, is still open source, but this time it's making it like all the other people that not just developer work in that way described. So what does it mean? For example, there are people coming to us and saying, hey, why don't you do this? I have a great idea about this and that. I say, okay, stop talking, write something down. Because when you write something down, we can share it, we can discuss it online, we can have more people seeing that. If you just tell me, I will refer you to someone, you have to say that again. And after 3 times, you get tired and forget. But also encourage them not just to talk about that, but also not just to write it down, but also turn it into something tangible that you can collaborate on, such as mock-up. So this is like just a drawing for an imaginary Congress website, right? But once you have that, a lot of people can see it, and a lot of people can improve it, even discussing on it, or even turn it into something in real. So that's actually what happened after a few weeks. Someone came in and then turned that into a different type of markup, which is in real website, but with fake data. right? So you can imagine it's a kind of continuation for different people to collaborate asynchronously. You don't have to have a grand plan for, okay, here's what I do, you do this, you do that. Just things happen kind of organically, and when you have and encourage this kind of open participation. So similar thing happened with our logo. The first version is on the left, but it's quite ugly, right? But we release it and then tell people, okay, if you have a better idea, come up and do something to it. And then, yes, a designer came in and said, okay, this is way too ugly. And then he's actually done 3 iterations of that, and now we're on the right-hand side, which is actually quite nice. Yeah. So, so if you haven't seen this talk, I strongly encourage you to take a look at Clay Shirky's TED Talk in 2012. It's about how the internet will one day transform government. He's talking about the open source collaboration model when